question of, do I have to be dissatisfied to be driven? Is that part of it? Is part of it that I have this vision for where I want to be or what I want to accomplish, and then I look at my current state and I realize there's a gap between where I am and where I want to be, and that dissatisfaction with that gap is what drives you forward. It's the drive to close the gap that gets you to show up and work hard or take the test or do the thing, And I think certainly there are many times in my life when that has been the driving force. But the healthiest response I think that I've come up with, or the counterpoint, is imagine that like an acorn falls from a tree and, it manages to take root and starts to grow. And, at first it's just this little acorn, and then it's a sapling, and then it's, grows into eventually this large mature oak. And at no point in that process was it like berating itself for only being an acorn or for only being a sapling, right? For not being enough yet, for not being big enough, for not having achieved that outcome. Nobody looks at it and thinks, oh, what a failure. You aren't a full oak tree yet. And yet, despite that, there isn't this dissatisfaction going on. It continues to grow. And I think the answer there is it grows simply because that is what an oak tree does. It grows because that is what it is encoded to do. And so I feel like the healthiest version of me, like just flowing with it, or just stepping into it, is what do I feel like I'm encoded to do? It's almost like I was made for this. This is my strength. This is what I like. It lights me up. It makes me feel alive. And then I can be quite driven and not feel dissatisfied in the moment. So I think that was like kind of the first thing that came to mind. The second piece is I have had this experience where the effort has been the reward, where the work is the win, or however people want to phrase it. Doing the thing is the satisfaction. But rarely do I have that experience right away. It has come with time. So like working out is a very good example for me. I've been training for 15 or 20 years now. And like I want all the same things everybody else does, right? I want to be healthy. You want to look good. You have all these like outcomes that you want from working out. But the last couple of years, I have started to train more and more just because of how I feel when I work out. I like how it makes me feel. And now I don't have to wait. I don't have to wait 2 years to see how I look in the mirror. Like I feel good when I'm doing this set. And so it becomes more about the experience and liking how I feel when I'm doing it. In my language, in the Atomic Habits language, it's what I call identity-based habits. Every time that I show up and work out, I am casting a vote for being the type of person who works out, for being an athlete, for being the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And every time I cast a vote for being that type of person, I feel good about myself. I feel like I'm showing up and being the kind of person I want to be. I feel like I'm reinforcing my desired identity. And I think this is it certainly is one of the concepts from Atomic Habits that has resonated most with people, which is rather than starting your habits and asking, what do I wish to achieve? What do I wish to, accomplish? You start by asking, who do I wish to become? And how are my habits reinforcing that desired identity? Am I casting votes for being that type of person? Every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you wish to become. So if you sit down and you study for 20 minutes on Tuesday night, you are casting a vote for being studious. If you shoot a basketball for an hour outside, you cast a vote for being a basketball player. And individually, those are small things, and they don't really mean a whole lot, in any given moment. But collectively, if you do it for 3 months or 6 months or a year, you cross this invisible threshold at some point where you say, yeah, being a basketball player must be a big part of who I am. And you start to take pride in being that kind of person. And if you take pride in it, if it becomes part of your story, then you'll fight to maintain the habit. And now all of a sudden, the situation is flipped. Now you're trying to do it rather than trying not to do it. Rather than trying to motivate yourself to stick to it, you're just saying, this is part of who I am. Like I get up and I go for a run because I'm a runner, not because I have a half marathon in 3 months. I'm doing it because I like being this kind of person. So I think the question of what are my actions reinforcing? How are my habits feeding my desired identity is an interesting thing to play with, and I think an important question for all of us to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I confess that friction for me is a great motivator. I was in essentially a scientific competition in my postdoc years, also when I started my lab, and I was like, this is great. Like I have something constantly to push against. And I enjoyed the work.
What kind of friction do you mean? Like having
a big lab that we were competing with. And it was a new area. A bunch of tools had arrived on the scene. We were developing tools. They were developing tools, and it was very, very competitive. And I was like, this is so great.
Felt like a little arms race.
Yeah, and it was. And they got their piece and we got our piece, and it all worked out. But I think competition can bring that out. And I think it was really healthy. And it raised the anxiety level, certainly. Because in science, you can actually get scooped. You can work very, very hard for a lot of years, and someone can beat you to the punch. And you have to tell the student or postdoc, like, we are resetting. And when I was the postdoc, it was scary. So you try and find your corner where there's a bit more assurance that you're going to be okay no matter what, but it's not always the case.
Sure.
Especially if you pick the problems that are like very timely. Like the tools just became available to answer questions that people have wanted to answer for a long time, and it's just a cluster.
Yeah.
And so I used to think, gosh, is this unhealthy? It's just like really unhealthy. I'm waking up at 4 a.m. and going to lab and like beating them. I'm like, no, are you kidding me? Like it was part of building my career, but I wouldn't want to do that forever. And so the flow piece sounds really, really nice. And at the same time, I don't know, I agree completely with what you said, that in the friction, you get these sort of breakthroughs of like, oh, this went well for 5 minutes. I really enjoy this. And you start to hold on to those pockets. You said you really enjoy the workout, the set. I feel a lot of resonance with that. I actually like exercising, but you're one of the few people I've ever met that doesn't say, oh, I like how I feel afterwards. I like how I feel afterwards, but I also like how it feels in the moment. It sounds like you do as well.
Yeah, I like the act of it. I like the practice of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a gift that you had to work for.
I think so. To the point that you just made, it's hard for you to imagine always being in that flow or always feeling that way about it. And also the competition can be very healthy. I agree. I think it's both. And I resist anybody who would say that they're always in one or the other. I think everybody's in both from time to time. And your point about the competition between the labs, that's instructive for building habits too. Sometimes it really helps if things have stakes. I find that it's actually quite hard for me to care if there are no stakes. I want there to be something that matters. Ultimately, that's why I decided to start sharing my ideas online. I was working at an orthopedic practice, just doing like an internship over the summer. This was many years ago. And I started writing about habits. And eventually, and nobody asked me to, I just was doing it because I was interested in it. And I got this Word doc that was like 60 pages long. It was just like James's thoughts on habits. And writing in the Word doc is kind of boring. There are no stakes, So I was like, well, eventually I need to put some of this up and just see, is it any good or not? Do people like it or not? And eventually that led to jamesclear.com, then eventually Atomic Habits. But the fact that there were stakes forced me to up my game. My undergraduate degree is in biomechanics, and then I got a business degree as well. So I don't have a degree in psychology, or neuroscience, which is kind of what I think you would expect somebody who writes about habits to have. And so I was kind of lamenting that early on. And I said that to a friend, and he said, well, the way you become an expert is by writing about it every week. And so I just really internalized that. And so I wrote 2 articles a week for the next 3 years. And it turns out if you write 150 articles about habits, you learn a lot along the way. And because it was public, I could get criticized every time. And I think that made the work much better. And ultimately, I was able to triangulate my way to, putting together some decent ideas about the topic.
And building habits and suppressing bad habits is synonymous with your name and vice versa. I think there are several cases I can think of. You, Derek from More Plates, More Dates, who does online fitness and health content, neither of whom have formal training in the information they share, who are both superb, like truly superb. And I know Derek a bit, and I think he also went out of his way to make sure that he was reading things with, an extra attention to the detail, making sure that the communication about it was correct, and acknowledging that he didn't have formal training in that area, formal academic training, forgive me, because all of this stuff, exercise and health, as well as habits, that you can practice them too.
Sure.
Right?
I think the big question is just competence versus credentials. If the argument is, well, you don't have a degree in this, well, that doesn't really tell me anything. But if the argument is this sentence is wrong, okay, well, now we have something to talk about, But if the sentences are right and I just don't have the degree, too bad. It